Today's unSeminary podcast episode is brought to you by Church Community Builder. I love how these guys help church leaders make and grow disciples by providing software and coaching focused on improving operational effectiveness. Church Community Builder provides leaders like me with insights into engagement of our church community, helping us close the gaps that allow people to slip away unnoticed. Visit churchcommunitybuilder.com to learn more.
Welcome to the unSeminary podcast. Are you looking for practical ministry help to drive your ministry further, faster? Have a sinking feeling that your ministry training didn't prepare you for the real world? Hey, you're not alone. Join thousands of others in pursuit of stuff that we wish they had taught in seminary. Buckle up and let's get started with this week's unSeminary podcast.
Well, hey everybody, welcome to the unSeminary podcast. My name's Rich, the host around these parts. So glad that you've decided to tune in today. You know, every week on unSeminary, we try to cover, a wide variety of topics to help you with some of the practical stuff that's going on at your church. Today, you're in for a real treat. You're going to be so glad that you've put us in your earbuds today. We've got David Fletcher with us. He is just a fantastic leader. He is the executive pastor at EvFree in Fullerton, California. He also runs a ministry called XPastor.com, which you might be familiar with them. They have a conference, all kinds of stuff they do. So welcome to the show, David.
Hey, good to be with you. Thank you.
And I'm so glad that you're here today. Now, why don't you tell us about EvFree Fullerton? Kind of give us the story, give us a sense of your, the church and your role there.
Sure. It's a historic congregation. Had a fellow named Chuck Swindoll here, one of the first.
Maybe heard of him.
Yeah. And he was really one of the first mega radio famous preachers.
Yeah.
So back in the day, they used to have buses of tourists come to the church on Sunday morning.
Crazy.
So the church grew. It was a large church. Chuck left, went and became president at Dallas Seminary. Dale Burke was here for 14 years. And then Mike Erie was here for 3 years. Mike did a lot of missional things, very catalytic, very prophetic in his style. And now we're in a transition. And we'll start a search soon. But nice. One of the things that Mike and I really resonated together on and loved doing ministry was on how to give ministry away and empower the next generation.
Very
I'd
cool.
love to visit with you guys for just a few minutes on that.
Yeah, very true. I'd love to hear more about that. Obviously, one of the things that churches struggle with is handing off, ministry to the next generation. What are you learning? How are you kind of facing the challenge of mentoring younger staff and leaders?
Well, I added it up this morning because I had never really put a pencil to it. And about 1/3, 11 out of 30 of our ministry staff will only be with us for 4 years.
Wow. Intentionally.
And they know that because we want to train them and release them. And we want to cry when they leave because it's really hard. But we want to see them launched because seminaries are great. Oh, wait, I'm talking to unseminary. But we know what the seminaries aren't covering. And so no one in seminaries is teaching somebody how to do my job to be an XP.
Right.
And similarly, youth pastors. So, we have 7 folks, 3 in junior high, 4 in high school ministry, who are going to be with us for 2 to 3 years. Train them, release them. Then we have another 10 or 20 interns I haven't even included in that mix.
Wow.
They're just with us for a year, mostly volunteer, a few paid. But we really believe in empowering the next generation. And success is not that everybody goes into vocational Christian ministry.
Right.
Success is that Jesus remains in the front seat, the driver's seat of the car, and that they decide not to put Jesus in the back seat as just a ride along for the rest of their life.
Well, let's dig into a couple of things you said there. So now you're intentionally, this feels like a fairly controversial idea, intentionally training up staff to let them go, to release them, to send them other places. Why would you do that? That seems crazy. You're investing in them, you're investing kind of relational capital in them, and then you're saying, okay, go, get out of the nest. What does that look like?
Well, you just hit it right on. It's wonderful, and you get some of the best and brightest, but you have to be ready from the get-go that they are going to leave, that this is a short-term position. Because, well, one, church is really expensive for a lot of full-time staff over the long haul, and the schools aren't doing it, so who's going to train up this next generation of pastors?
Interesting. Now, so then, do the people that attend your church, do they, they have a sense that, hey, some of these people aren't going to be with us very long, or does that kind of run in the background as a leadership, issue?
It's not hidden. It's not a hidden agenda. And it comes out from time to time. So, the listener is going to hear it. Some people will be surprised when some of these folks rotate off.
Right.
But the rest will be like, oh, yeah, you've kind of like been saying that for 3 years now.
Right.
And we understand it. But we don't want to see the person go, but we understand.
Right. Well, and I think, particularly in some of those roles, having, say, a youth person stay for 4 years is about right. There's a lot of churches would kill to be able to have their guys stay for 4 years, because there seems to be a high turnover area. Giving some purpose behind that to train and then release, I think, is a fantastic idea. Now, what do you do from kind of a role description point of view? What does that look like in one of these positions where you're kind of intentionally saying we want to develop these folks?
Well, even before you get into the role, you have to start with your budget and vision.
Right.
You have to have the orientation that we value long-term staff. We just may not have as many as we had at one point in time, but we highly value long-term staff. But their role is to mentor and coach the people of God, to be believer priests, not to only do ministry, but really to give it away, and then to give it away to the next generation. And then you have to align your budget, and you have to say, hey, here is a certain amount of ministry dollars that we may never see great fruit on, like with interns. Oh, we get a lot of work out of them, but it's not about the work, it's about the training. And on these folks, we may get a lot of their great training years. We get a lot of great stuff out of them. But their best years may be in 10 years.
Right.
Seeing the experience that we give to them.
Where do you find these individuals? Is this like, are they coming right out of school? Give me a sense of the profile of, this kind of role.
Well, we're close to Biola University and Fullerton University and Fullerton College and Hope University. So we have a lot of universities, so we can have undergraduates and graduates. So there's Talbot, there's Rosemead School close by, there's Fuller. So we have a lot of a rich pool to call upon. And there's just a lot of people that want to explore this ministry thing for, in the youth positions, a couple of years. And then in the more advanced positions, many of those are post-seminary.
Interesting. Now, I would imagine almost like a teaching, hospital that, having this kind of influx of people on a regular basis is going to, in a good way, I think, challenge you to experiment, to try new things, because you're bringing in kind of newer ideas. Give me a sense of, what's happening on that front in your church, what you've experienced on that front.
That's really the beautiful part of it is, the question for you and for me, because I've been in ministry now almost 35 years, is how do you stay fresh? It's Heraclitus's line from ancient Greece that you can never step into a river twice because it's always moving. So how do you keep fresh with culture when I don't have a full-time job to just go and understand modern culture? So what these folks do is they give us a wonderful window, and they are brought fully into every area of ministry and leadership so that we say, hey, what does a millennial think about this? What does a 22-year-old think about this? So we recently had a 22-year-old guy preach in our evening service, part of that preaching team. And we kind of get a picture of, oh, this is what resonates there, and this is what doesn't work for him. Then we need to be sensitive to that.
Interesting. Now, I would imagine a big part of this, it sounds great. We want people to challenge. We want, great ideas to bubble up. Is there a time where maybe, some challenging from, one of these, ministry staff maybe didn't go so well? And what did you learn from that experience?
I would love to tell you, pull out a story where it hasn't gone well. But frankly, we experiment. We give people all the rope they need. Hey, go try this. And failure is not an option, meaning it should happen. If we aren't failing at some period, then we aren't pressing hard enough into new and uncharted territory. And we have very robust discussions. So if somebody raises an issue, let's say a 22-year-old gal raises an issue. Well, then, I may look at a 30-year-old guy and say, well, what do you think about that? Let the two of them sort it out. I don't have to be the arbiter in everything. Right. And then empower and challenge. And if it's a safe place, I never want someone to fail in an unsafe place. Right. But, hey, okay, the safety net is there. And that's a fine event. There's 50 people coming to it. Let's try that. that's wonderful. Maybe it's the next wave, or maybe it's just a whim. But let's kind of investigate that.
Yeah, I can see where creating an environment, particularly an environment where you provide some guardrails. So it's like, hey, here's this kind of where we're headed, and a safety net that it's okay if this doesn't go well, is critically important as we move forward, in training and releasing younger staff, for sure. I would imagine a part of that is then how you structure, the job description and what the kind of their responsibility looks like. Can you give us insight into what that looks like?
Well, they have a fully formed job description with plenty of responsibility. So I'll give you an example. John Hurst, grad of UCLA Law School, high marks in that, was working for a firm down in Irvine, making a huge salary that you and I could never touch.
Right, exactly.
But he wanted to get back in ministry because he had been with Crusade, and God had been tugging at his heart since college.
Very cool.
And so when we opened up this 4-year position for an assistant XP, we had him apply. He applied. Didn't know him from Adam. And so we turned over the HR department to him, teaching him ops. This year, he ran the entire budget process with every staff member. Very cool. Freed up my schedule tremendously.
Absolutely.
Has revolutionized our HR department. He oversees all things legal and contracts. Just yesterday, he and Eddie, I'll talk about Eddie in a second, visited a church. What's the name will come to me. It's in Santa Monica, West LA. Oh, it's a church plant.
Okay, nice.
Lorenzo Smith and Casey out there. Collective Church.
Yes,
there. I knew I'd get it. Yeah. I was thinking Borg, and that's not right.
Assimilation is futile, or resistance is futile.
So we're building into him, but we're also learning from him. So Eddie's another guy. Eddie has a THM from Talbot and came on as an assistant XP. He's helping oversee operations, but also along the way we discovered he knew it, but we didn't know it. This brother could really preach. Had never preached in a mixed race environment because he comes from a Korean church, and kind of took him a message or two to get used to that. And what fun we're having with Eddie.
Very cool. Huh. That's very cool to hear. That's nice to get kind of an inside scoop, get a sense of what that looks like. On the kind of job description side of what you do, is there like an annual process where you go through at your church? I'm sure there is, to kind of review that and to make sure that things are kind of structured in the right way. What does that look like for you guys?
Everybody gets an annual review, and part of that annual review is looking at the role description. And I believe in honesty in the role descriptions. So I want percentages of time, because ministry is so fluid.
Right.
Well, it's like, Rich, what do you do on a given week? For me, I probably work 40% on leadership issues, probably 30% on elder issues, another 20% on problems, and 10% on ministry. And so then we look at that, and I put it up on Apple TV in my office. I do a paperless office, no desk, etc. So I just put them up on the screen. I say, so Rich, here's what's last year's of yours. What do you think that should be at this year? So it's a dialogue we enter into. We do some correction that they may or may not enjoy, but it's right straight face-to-face with their supervisor during that review process.
That's good. That's a great, a great tip that hopefully people are picking up there, to talk about not just here are the things you should be working on, but let's weight them, from a time and output, not just the time, but also the results. Like, hey, this is what we really need you to focus on in this coming year. That's fantastic.
Well, you have to do that if we believe that our vision statement should be reflected in our budget first, and then in our people's time. So how is our vision statement being reflected in what this person is doing? Because I can't handle a 3-page task list.
Right.
It's like, I don't know what that really means.
Right.
But a 1-page role description sorted and weighted by percentages of time, now that makes sense to me.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, when you actually get to the releasing of these leaders, what have you learned in that process? What actually comes down to they're stepping out, they're going to go do something else. How do you do that in a healthy way that honors them and honors the church?
It's really hard. And really, there can be a lot of tears because you don't want to let the person go. John Hurst has 1.5 years left. Tammy and I were talking about that in the car in our morning Starbucks date. And And it's like, it's going to be really hard because he's doing tremendous work. We love him tremendously. He's esteemed. He's super valuable. But you have to end the conversation in your head by saying, if I keep him, it would be wonderful for us and terrible for the church at large, because there will not be another person trained to do that. So I'm 56. And that means I only get, like, in trainee XPs, I only get like 2 or 3 more cycles of this. So I better give it away now.
Right. Very cool.
And then, you cry over it, but then you also prepare them and you help them with their resume. You help them with contacts. You are their references. What better reference?
Oh, it's huge.
To say, oh, Rich and I worked together for 4 years. It's a 4-year position. I love him tremendously. But he now needs to go lead an entire church. This is not the right place for him any longer.
Right. Well, the thing that I love that you're pushing on, you're challenging us here today, I think particularly in these kind of senior roles, executive pastor, maybe even lead pastor, a lot of times we don't have clear models of what that looks like to replicate those people. Because what we say, like, well, yeah, I'm training people around me, but I'm going to be here for a long time. I'm not going anywhere, which is, my sense from your story. There's no plan on going anywhere. So, hey, why, how do I train people and actually, release them? And I love what you're kind of laying out here to say, no, like, this is ultimately about getting them to step out in other places. And I totally agree on the reference thing. If you've done any hiring in the church, you realize you get these people and their resumes. And, a lot of times their supervisors aren't on those list of people to call. Right. And every time they are, that person goes to the top of the list in my book.
Yeah,
I'm like,
we want to be their champions.
Yeah, there's something there if their supervisor is saying, yes, I'd love to recommend you. Anything else you want to share on this before we pivot into the last part of our episode, the lightning round?
It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of hard work. It's a lot of investment. But I think the person who grows the most is me. They're just feeding into my life. You can look at the whole reverse mentoring book. Man, I'm just learning all the time. And one of the reasons that I stay in ministry is for guys like this. It's just so much fun to be around.
This is the unSeminary podcast. Stuff you wish they taught in seminary.
We're going to jump into the lightning round, that part of the episode where we ask similar questions.
Prize? Do I get a prize?
You might. Ooh, okay. Exactly. Similar questions. So today we got David Fletcher. Super excited to have him from EvFree Fullerton, also from XPastor, a great site you need to check out. And it's not X as in previous or done with pastor. It's executive pastor. What's an online resource you're using these days that's helping your ministry?
Well, I like unSeminary.
Thanks.
No, really, I found it, when your name came forward as a possible speaker at the church. And then Love Leadership Network. Other than that, I'm at like 75 sites a day. I'm always trolling for news and just always out there. So I use a lot of aggregation things like news or articles, whatever they're calling it on the iPad.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool. What's a book you've read in the last, 6 months to a year that's had an impact on your thinking in ministry?
Ooh, that would be Night by Elie Wiesel. And Night is part of a 3-book series where Wiesel documents going into the concentration camp. And the famous phrase that comes out of that is that when he went in, he says God died for him. And he became an agnostic/atheist for the rest of his life. The pain, the horror was too much. And that, I'd heard that phrase a long time, and I thought, I need to read the book where it came from. It's incredibly well written, an award-winning book. It's short, it's deep, it's powerful, and it's harmful just to read it. It's hard to wrap your mind and soul around that much pain.
Interesting. If you could get 15 minutes with any leader alive today, who would you want to get that with and why?
Well, since you said alive today, that makes it. There was that'd be Tim Cook.
Oh, nice, from Apple.
Be like, so hey, Cook, you followed Steve Jobs. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about the development of the Apple Watch. Let's talk about how to live beyond somebody's shadow and have the world's most successful company. What does all that mean?
That's fascinating. He would be an interesting one because from a market value point of view, there was this sense of, is it going to survive post Steve Jobs? And actually the opposite has happened. It's actually flourished under Tim Cook. But it's obviously a totally different leader, right? He doesn't have, he's just a totally different guy and seems to be, forging his own way, which is amazing. So that's great. Well, David, I appreciate you being on the show today. When you want to kick back, have some fun, relax, get out of the office, what do you like to do for fun?
Scuba diving.
Really?
Yeah, there's no conversation underwater.
You can't talk to me.
I know. I've been diving for a while. It's just great.
Oh, very cool.
It's athletic. We're out there. You see some amazing stuff. You get with some great folks. And the thing about diving that's so different from the church world is diving is black and white. You do this at 15 feet. You do this at 30 feet. Here are the absolute rules. No bending the rules whatsoever.
Right.
Church world is, well, we've got a lot of gray. We have the absolutes. But then, it's like, well, how are we going to help this person? And all these ins and outs. It's like, nope, not in diving. This is the rules. We're done.
Yeah, you do this or bad things happen. So
that's right.
Very cool. Well, David, if people want to get in touch with you or the church or, how can they do that? What's the best way for them to reach out?
Off the XPastor.org website is best.
Nice. Great. Yeah. XPastor.org. Great. Thanks so much, David. Really appreciate you being on the show today.
You bet. Thanks.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's unSeminary podcast. Don't be shy. We'd love to connect. Check out unSeminary Inbox. You can sign up at unseminary.com and we'll send you helpful training resources every week. Plus, you'll gain immediate access to our exclusive members area with tons of resources you can use. Connect with Rich on Twitter at Rich Birch or through email, rich@unseminary.com. Don't forget to check out the show notes for this episode at unseminary.com. It includes links to what we talked about today and more. Leave a comment. We'd love to hear from you. Did you enjoy today's episode? Drop by iTunes and leave a review. Thanks again for tuning in to this week's unSeminary podcast. Join us next week when we'll learn more stuff we wish they taught in seminary.